Jamar Chase not at practice for the first time yesterday for the Bengals. Do you think there's more meat on that bone than Bengals fans want to admit? I'm trying not to get nervous myself, but all right.
The answer is yes. The answer is yes. Listen, if you're first of all, there's two things. If you're a Bengals fan, you should be really optimistic on one level, right? We finished 9-8 last year. Joe Burrow didn't play for half the season, and we still had a winning record. And, there's been that weird situation where teams have gone from worst to first almost every year, it seems. And the Bengals would seem like they would be a team primed to do that. So there's optimism there. There's something not right about this offseason in Cincinnati. I can't put my finger on it. Can't say exactly what it is. But why they're messing around with Jamar Chase's contract is I don't understand. It's the most Bengals thing ever, right? But in the pre-Joe Burrow, Zach Taylor creation of this organization, this is what the Bengals were. This is what the Bengals did. They found players. They messed it up somehow. So they're messing with Jamar Chase. The T. Higgins thing is still very interesting. Joe's had an interesting summer, man, or an interesting offseason, right? He goes on these fashion shows, and now he shows up looking like early Eminem. I don't know. It kind of reminds me of the situation with the Bills last year and Stephon Diggs. It just, something wasn't right all year, and it finally escalated, and Stephon is now a member of the Texans. Something's not right in Cincinnati. So, yeah, if I'm a Bengals fan, I'm a little, wait a minute, we're not going to be the Bengals we were before all this, right? Because it sort of has a little bit of that feel to it.
Uh-oh. That was Trey Wingo, who joined us really right during preseason, right during camp, coming in. I'm the Bengals hater, right? Everyone thought that I knew that he was going to say that coming on. I was just as pleasantly surprised as all non-Bengals fans were about that. I know everyone in the chat was just ripping Trey Wingo. And I understood at the time. I remember coming out of that interview saying, man, I kind of disagree with Trey Wingo. I don't think anything's weird about this offseason. It seems like it's all positive momentum. Everyone's healthy. You know what I mean? Like they added some key pieces in the offseason. Like, what is there to be weird about this, even with the contract stuff with Jamar Chase? But, yeah, he might have been onto something. And I know, Elliot, you queued that up. What was it about that caught your attention heading into this conversation?
I just think that there were vibes coming into this year that weren't good. And we all knew that. It was fine, like up until preseason started. It was more fine, I guess. But once preseason started, and the Jamar Chase thing never got done, it felt like something where there was a bad vibe in the air regarding this Bengals team. And I think that vibe coming into a season just derailed it all. And Jamar's having one of the best seasons a wide receiver can possibly have. But the Bengals as a whole, you heard Trey say it at the end of that clip, there's something not right about the Bengals this year. They're not the Bengals that they were 3 years ago. It's just not that roster. It's not that team. It's not that organization. So I just wanted to play it because I think clearly at the beginning of this year, we might have closed our eyes to it. We might have been trying to avoid it the best we could. But there were people out there that said there was just something not right in the air with the Cincinnati Bengals, and it's stuck with us. The Bengals are 4-7, and it's been everything. It's been everything, including a disaster. So I just wanted to play it because it encapsulates the entire season.
Yeah, it's a shame. I mean, I had the same mindset as everyone else as soon as he said that was just overreaction by a Steelers fan, and we were going to be fine. But obviously, it's bled into the first 11 weeks of this season, and he was absolutely right. There's a lot more going on in this building than anyone wanted to admit in the offseason.
But carrying on with our Bengals conversation here again, and a lot of the, when you have a shaky start or a shaky season, because this is no longer a start. We're heading into December. This is the season. This has been a shaky season. In previous years, I mean, even last year with the shakiness of it, you still finished 9-8. I mean, will this team finish above 500? You would like to think so, but will this team surpass last year's record? I don't know. I mean, this was finished with 9 wins at 5-5 when Joe Burrow was out there. He goes out injured, and they still finish above 500. Will this team with the healthy Joe Burrow be able to get to 500? That's the big question mark right now. But with that, when you have uncertainty like the Bengals do, you start questioning which players you need long-term and which players you want to cut ties with. And that's what we've been doing over the last couple of segments, keep, cut, or trade. And we'll continue on. Let's go to a guy that I think has been one of the most underrated Bengals even throughout that year that they did make it to the Super Bowl. Let's go with Trey Hendrickson at this point. because this is a guy that everyone feels is being disrespected and left out of Defensive Player of the Year conversations. I've always, not in a hating way, said I don't think you're going to give the best defense. You're not going to give the Defensive Player of the Year award or give serious consideration to a guy that's the best defensive player on one of the worst defenses in the league. Whether that's fair or not, I just think that's the reality of it. He has been the heart and soul of this defense for years. He's been the best defensive player that this team has had. But he's also getting a little bit older. What is the future of Trey Hendrickson? Is it, okay, you try to find key pieces to build around him heading into next season, or do you use the value of him to try to go get more pieces? Do you trade him? What do you do with Trey Hendrickson? Do you keep him? You're not cutting him. Do you keep him or trade him is basically the conversation at this point with Trey Hendrickson. Where are you guys at with the Bengals' top pass rusher?
I would personally say it's a no-brainer to extend Trey Hendrickson. I think what he's done in this city and what he's done on this team is something that you can't overlook. He's been incredible for the Bengals since he got here, and there's no way I'm letting him leave the building. I mean, I know the Bengals operate in that way and have for years. You don't re-sign 30-year-olds. But I think as we've seen year after year with the Bengals operating with this mindset, there are exceptions to the rule. How many years after we let Andrew Whitworth walk, where we bang in the table, we need a tackle? And this guy's still playing at a high level for 4 or 5 years. We let Kevin Zeitler walk, the guard, and now he had a 95 PFF grade for the Lions last week. These guys can still play at a high level. I'm honestly very for the Bengals' mindset of not extending guys over the age of 30. If you're an organization that's not going to spend big money, don't take risks on non-elite talent at old ages. I'm completely fine with that. This is 100% a clear exception. Trey Hendrickson's one of the best edge rushers in the league. It's quarterback, wide receiver one, left tackle, edge rusher, in my opinion. The Bengals currently have great ones at all those positions. You got to keep the edge rusher in town. If I would have seen more out of Myles Murphy or Joseph Osai at this point, maybe I have a different tone. But I haven't seen anything out of any pass rusher on this team that makes me think letting Trey Hendrickson go would be a good decision. I think you have to look to extend Trey Hendrickson. You have him this year. You have him next year. I would already be on the phone working to lock him in for at least another year or two in Cincinnati.
I don't know if I agree. I agree with you in the large scheme of things, because if you lose Trey Hendrickson, the Bengals defense is actually trash. There's no shining light at any position with the Bengals defense if you lose Trey Hendrickson. It's just been a disaster. I think if you were to trade him, I think there's maybe more you can help the defense than if you keep him. Because one, Trey Hendrickson doesn't help the Bengals going forward if everything is just as bad as it is. You can't save him. Max Crosby can't save the Raiders. Garrett can't save the Browns. One good defensive player can't save an entire roster. It's just how it is. And I think if you're able to trade him for a valuable couple of picks, then yeah, I'd consider doing it. Of course, I'd want to pay him. Of course, you want to keep one of the best the sack leader in the NFL with your franchise. Of course, you would want that. But if the Bengals defense is going to be just as terrible as it is next season, then what's the point of having Trey Hendrickson here,
fair.
Right? That's my argument. And if you're going to have 15 sacks, 20 sacks, but not one single other player is going to help you out, then I don't understand paying all that money to Trey Hendrickson. Good organizations sign good players, no matter the position, no matter how old they are. If they're good, you sign them. But if the rest of the roster is bad, and I'd argue the Bengals roster is not in a good spot right at this very second, then I wouldn't spend all that money in the world on Trey Hendrickson to have nobody helping him.
That's a great point. I think we're all talking from the Bengals' perspective. We also have to look at this from Trey Hendrickson's perspective. This is a two-way street. Trey wanted to leave last offseason and came back to try to win a Super Bowl. Well, clearly that's not going to happen this year, and at least right now it doesn't look like that's going to happen this year. What's the incentive for Trey Hendrickson to re-sign here, to come back to Cincinnati? Why would he want to do that? Craig Sandlin threw that question out last night on Chatterbox Bengals. Why would Trey Hendrickson re-sign in Cincinnati even if the Bengals give him a contract extension offer? Because he can go win somewhere else with a better defense with more help. His production's tops in the league right now, and it's being dragged down by what he's surrounded by. It's exactly what we just talked about with the Ellie De La Cruz MVP conversation. Your stats can't be as high as they could be if you have nothing else around you to protect you. Teams know Trey Hendrickson's the only rusher worth a damn on the Bengals defense. They're doubling and triple teaming him every single night. You got to get someone next to him to incentivize him coming back. And if he wants to, I would certainly be open to it. But if not, you can't let him walk for free after next year. You have to get value.
No,
like
100%. 100%. You have to trade him. If you have no intention to bring him back, has to be traded.
No question about it.
I will say this regarding the Bengals. If you're able to supplement the defense a little bit, or at least if you have the intention of it, then yeah, sign him, pay him a bunch of money. I'm just saying if our hopes here is we're just going to sign trash, and I probably shouldn't use trash on the radio because it is pretty disrespectful, but they haven't been good. I don't know what else we're supposed to call the defense, right? If they're a bottom 5 defense in the NFL, I don't know other verbiage to use there. But if the goal is for this front office to clean house, help the defense, then yeah, sign him, bring him back. But if that's not the case, trade him.
One thing to consider, too, Jamar Chase, fingers crossed, is going to get that big-time contract. How do you give him a big-time contract and take care of Trey Hendrickson and address all the holes that are on this roster outside of just saying, hey, we're going to, the draft is so important. You do have to plug a lot of holes through the draft, don't get me wrong, but you're not going to fix all the holes in the draft to get to the point where all of a sudden you totally eliminate all the deficiencies that exist this season into next year. If you pay Jamar, and you're going to, and you pay Trey Hendrickson, like in all the points that Jake said, too, it makes sense to do it to a certain extent. Now you pay those guys a boatload of money. How much money is left to go fix holes on this defense in the free agency? You're relying on the draft. You're technically right back where you are right now, a year from now, if you pay Jamar and Trey Hendrickson. It's a tough spot to be in because I don't think, and I've heard you guys say this before, fixing this defense is not a one-off season project. It's going to be the next 2 drafts, hopefully pieces from this past draft that are injured and haven't got a chance to see them out there. This past draft, this draft, and maybe next draft. But how you keep all these pieces together that are the experienced veteran players that you know what you get and fix all the holes in the draft, man, I don't know how quickly the Bengals could turn the defense around when it's all said and done. But as you've said, this defense hasn't even had to be – we're not asking for an elite defense, a top 10 defense. If this is just an average defense, the record of the team this year is vastly different as well.
Paying Jamar Chase and Trey Hendrickson puts you in hell if you do it the way the Bengals have been extending players for the history of their franchise. That's why I said going into this, I think it was yesterday or 2 days ago, the biggest thing to watch for this offseason is whether the Bengals cut the guys we're asking them to cut.
Yep.
Because that's the first point where we're going to be able to see whether this front office is willing to break their mold of the way they've been operating forever. And if you do extend Trey Hendrickson and Jamar Chase and you're still only putting guarantees in the first year, you are going to be screwed. You can't do it. You're going to have to change how you operate. You're going to have to spread this money out. Trey has another year left on his deal. Jamar has his 5th-year option next year. You can use those extra years of wiggle room if you're creative like the rest of the GMs on winning teams in the NFL and spread that money around. The Bengals have the opportunity to do it, and you'd still have enough money to extend a guy like T. Higgins if you do it creative enough. We've seen teams bend over backwards, play with the cap. The cap's not real for anyone but the Cincinnati Bengals. The Bengals operate with that hard number. You see how many years have the Saints been in cap hell?
All of them.
30 years, and they just extended Alvin Kamara, made him the highest paid running back in football. Like, it doesn't matter to anyone but the Bengals because they roll over these money and they're creative with contracts. The Bengals have to break how they're operating. Otherwise, it's going to take a lot longer than 2 years to fix this defense.
We only have a little bit left, but let's throw out an obvious, 2 more names to be exact. Let's go with the kicker, Evan McPherson. I know we talked about him a lot earlier in the week. They just gave him for a kicker, they gave him a lot of money this past offseason, and I thought at the time that was a good contract. You need a kicker. You need a good kicker. And the kicker that they paid in the offseason was the perception of him as the guy that had been so dominant from 50 or further back, what we saw during the Super Bowl run. I mean, he played a pivotal role in those runs, no doubt about it. But now all of a sudden, he hasn't played up to that level, and you have a little bit of time left with him and a contract that isn't the easiest just to get rid of for a kicker. What do you do with Evan McPherson? You cut him, you trade him, you keep him. What do you do with McPherson? Is he the long-term kicker regardless of how he finishes out this season?
I'm keeping him. I'm not cutting him after this season. I mean, if it goes as bad as it's been going and maybe it stays that direction, then maybe we move on from Evan McPherson. But I have a hard time believing he's going to be this bad for the entirety of the season. I think he's going to be the kicker of the future. I definitely want to go get legitimate competition next offseason. I'm not talking about an undrafted or a practice squad guy. I want to bring someone in here that can actually compete with McPherson in the offseason. But I think he's going to be the kicker of the future here in Cincinnati.
Kickers go through rough patches. This is a rough patch. Give him a season or two with the new holder. Let's see what Rico can do next season. Rico, excuse me, and we'll move on. I'm not going to give up on Evan yet. And you can't give up on Evan yet. I don't know what the better alternative would be if you were to cut Evan McPherson at this very second. Let him ride out the season, see if he can fix it. Let him start next season, or at least let him go through camp. If in camp he still looks terrible, then that's when you make a move. But you don't make a move right now.
We just saw the Chiefs lose Harrison Butker to a torn meniscus. Cutting Evan McPherson would be completely crazy by the Bengals to do mid-season. I know you're probably out of the playoff hunt, you're down below 15% and all that good stuff, but you still need someone that can put a foot on a ball. And I know McPherson hasn't been great, but he's better than the other options out there mid-season. So I would certainly rock with him through the rest of the season. I think that's the craziest point of this conversation, people asking to cut McPherson during the bye week or anything along those lines. You actually don't even get the benefits of the void year on the contract if you cut him before June 1st. So if you are going to cut him, you wait till the offseason. But even then, I think that would be an overreaction unless it continues this way for the rest of the season and we end the year 0% from 50 yards and all that good stuff. Then sure, move on from him. But I have a hard time believing that this is the new Evan McPherson.
Could you imagine the Bengals cutting him and then the Chiefs picking him up?
And being the best kicker in the world.
Could you imagine that? And then they run like it's a two kicker set. They have both kickers line up, but only one of them is going to go in.
You know what they say: if you have two kickers, you don't have one.
That's right.
Last not least, only a couple minutes remaining. Look, we've been talking about T. Higgins for quite some time, and there's still the option to tag him again. You still could tag him and trade him. I don't think they're going to keep him. It would be silly just to outright just let him go. I saw something the other day. ESPN reports that the likelihood is the Bengals are just going to let him go test free, or just let him hit the market. Kind of wild, not getting anything back in return. Now, to their credit, they didn't envision the season being 4-7. They brought him back knowing that they could potentially lose him for nothing, but bringing him back thinking that the return would be maybe not draft picks or players, but the return would be giving this team the best opportunity to win the Super Bowl this season. They obviously haven't got that return, not through lack of his effort or the offense's effort. It's all on the bad defense, of course. But what do the Bengals do with T. Higgins when it's all said and done? Is he really going to walk and they get nothing in return for him?
I think so. I mean, if I had to guess, yeah, that's exactly what's going to happen. That's what they did with Jesse Bates, who was the number one safety in football. You absolutely could have got good value out of a double tag on Jesse Bates and trade him again. I don't know why the Bengals won't use these things that the league gives you. You can tag T. Higgins for, I think it's 120% of what he made this year.
Yeah.
It'd be about $28 million, and then you trade him right on that contract to someone else, and you have that window in between the franchise tag assignment and signing day where another team can still get an extension done with him pre-trade. This system is set up perfectly for what the Bengals are in right now with T. Higgins. You took a swing on a one-year fully guaranteed franchise tag. It didn't work out for you. They give you the opportunity to tag him again and move him for some kind of draft compensation, and it wouldn't be the compensation you would have got last year. It's going to be lower because I think every team in the league recognizes that the Bengals probably can't operate with T. Higgins on that double franchise tag and an extended Jamar Chase next year. You just can't do it. You wouldn't have enough cash to go help the other pieces of this team. The only way T. Higgins is on this team next year is if you can work out a long-term extension. But I don't think that's likely unless he does miss the next 6 games or so and drives that number down below $20 million. But I think if the Bengals don't double tag and trade T, it's one of the worst moves in this franchise's history. But I certainly expect it to happen.
I mean, they got to do it. I hope they do it.